Okay, everybody. Okay, today is a very big day. Today's a big day, everyone, because look what came out. Is everyone ready for this? Oh, bam! Nach Daily. My Sefer came out, everyone. Nach Daily, Navi Made Easy. If you want to learn Navi, or you've been tinkering with Navi, or you've been thinking about learning Navi, now is the time. We opened up Navi for all of Klal Yisrael with Hashem's help, Baruch Hashem. The copies are going to be available in Israel in stores in about a week. And then we're having, I think, 600 copies sent to the States. That will be in stores all over the States. You can pre-order on Mosaic Press, or if you're in Israel, you could just come and pick it up for me. And I'll be happy to sign it for you also. The signature's free. So I'm very excited. I got the books yesterday, and I'm just being Modiya the Olam. So they're going like hotcakes. So get it while you can. This brings us back to Rav Kook now. So let's just always, Hey Chanani Ba'olam, where are we in this world? A question we must ask ourselves every day. So right now we were holding in Orot, the Zeronim section, and more specifically, we began, last week we didn't have shiur, but now we're back. We started L'Melchamat Hadeyot Ve'Emunah, the war of worldviews. And just to catch us up, what we began with is Rav Kook is taking sharp criticism of Mechanchim, of the Rabbanim of the day, about the negative Judaism and the limits of negative Judaism, and how we have to have a more broader, expansive Judaism that encompasses Hakol, that encompasses everything. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to be trudging through Rav Kook a little bit today. Here's where it gets a little bit in the thicket of things. He's going to say something somewhat technical, so bear with me. We're going to try to smooth it over and make it easier to understand. But we're going to be trudging through today. And what Rav Kook goes on to say in the World of Worldviews, that we need to have, not only do we need to have a more encompassing Judaism, a more encompassing worldview that is kol hakol, that incorporates everything. But what we need to do is we need to discover, again, I'm going to use more modern words to describe this. What we need to discover is, he says something remarkable, that we need to discover underlining universal spiritual principles that incorporate everything, right? Meaning to say, we need to shift our paradigm of spirituality, of spirit of Hashem, and we need to enter or maybe reawaken to a paradigm that is true. Now, when you think, and bear with me as we go through this little hakdam I'm going to say over here, that when you think of true principles in the most authentic way of principles, true principles are something that are already there. They just have yet to been discovered or yet to been in line with, right? So for example, what's theory, right? E equals mc squared, right? Einstein's theory of relativity, right? Means Einstein didn't discover the theory of relativity, right? He did, but he didn't. It was always there, right? Energy equals matter times the speed of light. It's something that was already there, right? But until he was megala it or revealed it, right? It was just, no one understood that. So people are coming up with all sorts of theories in order to try to understand the world, and I don't know the theories of the day at that time, but you see, our understanding was in a pre-paradigmatic stage. Once you understand a true paradigm, once you understand what's true, you now understand what's not true. It invalidates all the false theories, right? So what Rav Kook is going to say is, so when you discover a universal principle, what it does is it encompasses everything in the most simplest way. And simultaneously, it invalidates false theories. And it shows what's true. So we call that non-reality thinking begins to fall away and you enter into a new understanding. What Rav Kook is going to say, he's actually going to use astronomy. It's like physics and astronomy prior to Newtonian physics, okay? And astronomy prior to Galilean understanding, right? So what happens is that prior to understanding there's something called gravity in the world, there were all sorts of theories of understanding, trying to explain this but this point didn't fit with that point, so we need to figure out another point to fit with this. There were all different sorts of worldviews and understandings about how the world operated. Newton came along and he revealed a simple principle in the world. There's something called gravity. And Galileo took it a step further and said, well, the Earth isn't the center. It's not everything going like this. There's actually an orbital celestial thing, and everything's rotating around another, and the gravitational pull has to do where we are in relationship to the moon, and everything is exactly. Obviously, people were against this at the time, and in fact, Galileo's views were so strong. They only became famous after he died. He had a lot of things set to publish after he died, and the Christian Church put him in Cherem. They had him under house arrest because they found his ideas so threatening. But the point being is, and all this is going to be relevant to what we're going to say. The point being is, when you come across a universal spiritual principle, it's simple, it includes everything, and it's unrelenting. It's absolutely true. It's a light tower. The light tower is always there. It's unmoving. It is consistent, and it doesn't change. It is constantly there. In the same way, we have, let's take germ theory, Semmelweis. Now, Rav Kook doesn't talk about germ theory over here, but Semmelweis, I believe he was a German scientist, and he discovered that he was wondering why is the mortality rate higher in the birthing ward than it was in other areas? Why do women and babies keep dying during birth? Right, the mortality rate was very low. If you were lucky to be born, right, everyone was dying then, right? And what happened was Semmelweis, it's a fascinating story, but he drove himself crazy until he realized that they were using the same scalpel for autopsies that they were in the birthing ward. And there's these microscopic insects, things called germs. It was actually his partner that discovered it. I'll say this. The story is interesting in a second, right? And so he got people to change their scalpel and wash their hands. And then the deaths in the birthing ward started being reduced. So he got, right? How he understood this is interesting. What happened was he was obsessed with this. And now germs, we all know there's something called germs, right? And this discovery wasn't so long ago. Right? It really wasn't so long ago, maybe 150 years ago, So I think even less than that. So what happened was in the end, he nicked himself with one of his scalpels, and he died from an infection. And his partner was like, "There's something on the scalpel." His research assistant, I forget his name, but they were onto this. Right? You get goosebumps saying it, right? So once you know that there are germs, now you know why people are dying in the birthing ward. Before they had, if you look at the medical textbooks of those days, right, they were full of all sorts of guesses, right? Fancy theories. The positioning of the beds in the birthing ward, the way the sun and hay fever, all sorts of things were the leading cause of death of children and women during childbirth, right? But they discovered, no, it has nothing to do with it. So when you find a true principle, something that's absolutely true, it incorporates everything, has mass ramifications, and it's also unrelenting. Okay? Now look over here in Orat HaKodesh. We're going to just borrow from Orat HaKodesh. That is the piece that starts with, over here. What letter is that? That's Dalet, right? Look in I just want to read you a sentence over here to introduce this. It's really fascinating, right? This is Orat HaKodesh, 4 volumes for anyone who wants to know. And this was the Nazir compiled Orat HaKodesh. It took him about around 20 years of compiling Orat HaKodesh. And it's amazing. I began it not too long ago, to be honest. But when I got the full set, I started, I'm like, okay, it's cool water on the soul. But look at, this is Orat HaKodesh, the first section called Chachmas HaKodesh, and this is letter Daled. Ha'emes nitba mikol. The truth is, ha'emet hanitba'at mikol, the truth which is implanted in everything. Okay? Kol ma sheha'emes hi yoser gavoa, hi yoser pshuta. Anything that the truth is higher, hi yoser pshuta, it's more simple. The yoser nechutza lekol, and it's more applicable to everything. Right? Principles. Principles are true. They're unchanging. They're simple. They're not convoluted. And it applies, has mass implications and ramifications of things. Tzarot halev shel adam alul lehi lenasot lenesach es ha'emes lechalakim lahaktin oso. The pains of the heart of man were bound to break things up into small compartments and have all different sorts of chalakim, right? To create a lot of individuation in things. Metziera hu mipnei gadla. It's scared because things are big. V'choshev shebehektanasa tiye yoser palpalarit. And they think that if I make something small, the mind thinks if I go into the details and I really break something apart, right, then it's more palpable. I can more digest it. Yoser shava l'chol nefesh. Ube'emes bezehi machbid yoser umeneh me'akol es yoser nachutz lo. But the truth is, by making things small, right, it thinks that now I think that if I break something down to be very small and very particular, it could apply to more people. Now more people could digest it. But the truth is, it makes things more heavier. Umeneh me'akol es yoser nachutz lo. And it presents things from having more applications, more implications and ramifications. Ha'emes ha'achrona, ha'emes elohis nitba mecheskes hakol. But the truth is that true godly understanding, the truth of God, applies and is entrenched in everything. It could contain a lot. V'dafka b'chol amasa berom gavoa ora, and it specifically, it's all its truth and it's all its pristine high light. Bimlo ha'emes shelo, that it's full of truth. V'dafka b'shvil kach hi roi lakol, and it's precisely because it's so high, it's filled with so much light, it has broad applications to everything. L'chol basar, to all humanity and mankind. L'chol yatzar, to all creations. L'chol poel, to all of existence, to everything that's happening. Like gravity, right? There's no exceptions to gravity. Gravity applies to everything, right? God applies to everything. Now I'm gonna skip a paragraph over here. Ashreinu matov chalkenu, praiseworthy is our lot in life. Shebeshvil hashavas ha'emes gedola hapshuta be'olam, because of the return of the simple, large truth. Simple and large, right? Shabach chai kol neshama tolim bo, that all of existence is dependent on. V'chidesh ora olam malo shaluvim nivcharnu anu, right? And to the renewal of the light in the world and to filling all the gaps, nivcharnu anu, we have been chosen. V'yesh lanu zeh kishron b'atzmusenu hapratit v'klalit, right? And we have this in our essence, both specific and broad, right? It needs to be very specific. The principle needs to apply to even an apple on a tree, to an ant, but also is broad. It applies to many different things. B'tor todosenu b'teva basreinu. We have this in our bones. We have this in our spiritual DNA. B'mezek artzenu, and with the weather of our land. B'nishmas avosenu hagdolim, in the souls of our huge ancestors, right? Avraham, Yitzchak. L'kedoshim asher ba'aretz hema v'aderei kol chesed bam, to the holy ones that are in the ground. The hema, they are v'aderei kol chesed bam, right? Anyone who says Tikkun HaKlali knows this one, right? L'kedoshim asher ba'aretz hema b'prat tzaddik yesod olam, right? Being connecting yourselves to all our dead ancestors and the tzaddikim. V'anochi naticha sorek kala zera emes, and I'm going to plant in you the sorek tree, the seed of truth. Meaning to say, I wanted to read this because broad principles are true and unrelenting.
You keep on saying, he said pshuta, and you used simple, and you said before also. Maybe, is it possible it doesn't mean simple, it means obvious?
It means obvious too. Pshita means simple, obvious, right? Because, for example,
because not every universal truth is simple, I would think.
Right. Well, it is. Well, the thing is, obvious is also a great word to say it, right? Here, look in Sichas Aran quickly. I didn't photocopy this. Where is it in Sichas Aran? Oh, I took a picture. Oh, did I print it out? No, I didn't. Where is it in Sichas Aran? Hold on a second. Hold on. I think I... hold on, where is this in Sichas Aran? Kuf Aleph in Sichas Aran. Okay, here. Kuf Aleph in Sichas Aran. Look what he says over here. And all this we're going to apply back inside. When we talked about simplicity, Kuf Aleph, short piece, Kvar Mavor Kampam. Kuf Aleph, Sichas Aran. Kvar Mavor Kamavayim, She'ein Tzrichim Shum Chachmas Ba'avodas Habari Yisbarach. Rak Timus Upshitas Emunah. You don't need any chachmas in serving God. You just need Tmimus Upshitas, simplicity, obviousness, right? That word Pshitas again, and faith. You don't need to be smart to serve God, okay? Va'amar Shabshitas Hu Gvoa Min Hakol. Coming back to this word Pshitas over here. That Pshitas, simplicity, serving Hashem with simple faith is Gvoa Min Hakol. It's higher than everything. Ki Hashem Yisbarach, and this is a kicker I want to say, Ki Hashem Yisbarach Hu Bevadai Gvoa Min Hakol. Because Hashem, of course, is higher than everything. V'hu Yisbarach Pashut B'tachlis Habshitas. Right? And Hashem is Pashut, simple, indivisible, whole, maybe even obvious, right? B'tachlis Habshitas. Right? That Hashem is indivisible. Right? We need to serve Hashem with simplicity because Hashem is Pashut. Right? It's Pshitas. Simple might not be the right word, right, to describe Hashem. But there's a pshitas, a wholeness, a tamimis, right? That you can't split Hashem into many parts. You can't split Hashem up. There's not 10 gods, there's one God. Hashem has different names, aspects of his name, Elokim, Shaddai, Yudke, Vavke, Tzivakos. So obviously that's all not different parts of Hashem, Ki'ilu. It's one God, right? And all Kabbalah deals with this. There's always this big disclaimer we'll learn in Kabbalah. We're not breaking Hashem into parts. It's all part of his Achdus HaPashut. Because you have to be careful because you can't say there's two gods. Right? That's when you get into problems. So, again, there's this word, the divine light of Hashem's will there's this wholeness, there's this unification of it, right? And all principles, universal principles, just contrasting this. Okay, let's jump now into this. Now that we said all this, let's jump now in, and this will be easier to understand now. Okay? And the application here is, as he's talking about the war of ideas, that Judaism contains everything, right? And we need to understand that, go back to the universal nature of it and how it incorporates large views. And any true principle incorporates large views. Now we're going to trudge through this now, okay? Kol gilei ruach klali lefi hitgabrut haklalot. We're at the bottom of the page, over here. Does everyone see? Kol. Okay. Kol gilei ruach klali lefi hitgabrut haklalut shebo. Any spiritual generality according to its strength and its vastness, shebo kach havadaut, but it also contains certainty in it. Klalut and vadaut, and certainty. Mitchazekes bekirbo lefi midas vaduso. It becomes stronger according to the absolute certainty of it. Kishem she'eno nosein makom l'safek, just like it gives no room for doubt. Kach enu mevater eschuto le'acherim l'shatfan imo. It also is, in a certain way, unrelenting. It's also inflexible, right? In order to, like that light tower, right? Enu mevater eschuto le'acherim l'shatfan imo. It stands alone on its own. It doesn't mevatel its merit in order to co-join with other things per se. It is what it is. It's true, right? When you know what's true, you now know what's not true, right? It invalid, right? Haklalut v'havadaut, right? Broad expansiveness and certainty, right? V'hayichud tloyim heim zebazeh, and oneness. They are interdependent on one another, right? Because once you understand gravity, right, you now understand why an ant doesn't float up in the air, right? So gravity is the perfect example, and he's going to talk about gravity in a moment. He's going to use the example of gravity, right? That applies to everything, but there's no exceptions. So it has vadaut, it has klalut and vadaut, like we say vadai, specific, right? It has klalut and vadaut, right? Tulim heim bezeh, and they go together, right? Because if it's broad, it needs to apply to the specific. Right? Lemashal, shitas hatchuna hayishanot. For example, an old understanding of astronomy, right? Shita tatchuna is astronomy. Old astronomy, right? Shayu chazionot pratim mispashim rak al chul gvul. Next page. You see hatchuna bilvad, right? The way it understood things is it had It had illusion thinking, chezyonot pratim, had like chezayon, it could be like a fantasy or an illusion or a vision, had different sorts of, in different specific parts, and it understood that mishpatim alchu gvul, that they were all sitting on this expanse, like if you, I'm not going to go into explain this, but really what this is saying is, and some of the Rishonim actually wrote that this is how the world works. Like picture like a translucent glass that the world was filled with, and things were all moving on that glass, meaning to say that ether was moving and all the things were implanted in it. So it wasn't that the planets was moving, it was that there was something called like this ether, and in the ether was moving, and that moved all the other things. Whatever, it's not a conversation for now. We could study old things of astronomy, but we're just going to take what's relevant over here, right?
Covering all the sciences today.
What?
Covering all the sciences today.
We're covering all the science. Just to see how worldly Rav Kook was, right? That might be the main point over here. Hayasafik tamun b'kirbon. But even with all their details of comparing and contrasting, like we said earlier, people are comparing and contrasting different parts of Judaism to try to explain it, when none of those are the explanation of Judaism, right? Hayasafik tamun b'kirbon. Even so, they had a lot of questions and doubts. Until it was the general understanding of the astronomers were shetare. Welcome. Oh, we got copies today. Right? Shetare hatchuna hinam rak limtsoa eza hatsa lipiturain hasheni hatnua harabim shal hagramim hashmeimim v'she'efshar shepitarin shia be'eza derech acher. Right? Until it became in the ways of the astronomer's mind, in order to find a pitaron, because there were so many questions on this types of astronomy, they wanted to find a way that another way would explain right? If I have a contradiction between point A and point B, let me try to understand how to resolve the contradiction between the parts. Umeyom shechok koach hamoshech. But from the day gravity was understood, right? From Newton understood gravity, and Galileo physics and astronomy. Right? That's what he's referring to now. That was the whole hakdama around gravity. Right? From the day gravity was understood, it started to answer up and explain all astronomy. Because it's a cosmological phenomenon. It's a true universal principle. Now what happened is they threw away the burdens and the bands of doubt that were in their minds. So once they had a whole other explanation of astronomy, all the illusional false thinking began to just fall away. Right? It was a new paradigm. It's kind of like, let's say you're a flat earth thinker, right? And you were around in the times before Galileo and you thought the earth was flat, right? So now, if you were a sailor, what would be all the things that you're worrying about? Well, what are you going to do when you get to the flat of the earth? Oh, when I see the edge of the earth coming, I have a long anchor, and I'm going to drop that anchor, and it's got a rope, and that's going to stop me from falling off the edge of the earth, right? And what are you doing on your ship, Tom? Oh, you know what I'm doing? I have a guy on the lookout tower 24 hours a day with this amazing telescope. And when he sees that coming, the edge of the earth, he's going to say, "Ahoy, my mateys, turn around," right? But then they discover, wait a minute, the earth was never flat. It was round. All that thinking is taken off the table. It's a model of subtraction, a model of reduction. The illusion thinking that they were thinking vanished in the split second. By clarifying what's true, you now understand what's false, right? So the extra thinking that they were doing disappeared. All the extra thinking that the astronomers were doing, right, disappeared. There's something called gravity, right? It's the same thing with us psychologically. When we understand what's illusion thinking, where our experience of life is actually coming from, we can now clarify where it's not coming from. And all the extra thinking that we're doing disappears, falls by the wayside. So it's not about taking on more thinking, having more and more and more and more. It's a model of reduction about having less thinking. And Rav Kook is saying that when we discover true universal spiritual principles, right, all the false illusionary thinking of what we think Judaism is, trying to explain it, when we understand that we're the light of lights and Hashem is the Or HaOrot, right? Disappears like that. All the illusion, right? That's what we say, Hayinu Kechomim, we'll be like dreamers. Wake up, oh, look at that. Huh. Oh, that was an illusion. Right? We're going to wake up to the truth. Umizeh gam, we're going to try to get to the end of the paragraph over here. Trudging, we gave an introduction, we're trudging through this piece. It's like a very technical piece. Right? Umizeh gam, umizeh ba gam ha'hevdel hasheni. Now, a second thing happened. So we understood the unifying principles that bring unity, but a second thing happened as well, right? So they answered up all the questions that the astronomy was happening with gravity and Newton, right? A second thing came. Right? The old ways of thinking that we thought that we could join them together, right? Right? It didn't happen with a new understanding, astronomy. Because of the astronomy, the new understanding of astronomy that is patient and flexible and tolerant, right? It's klalit v'vadait, those words. It's broad and specific. And now he introduces the words kanait, means it's flexible and tolerable. The ef shar sheyoma adam liftar ksatz mesachzionas hatchunas ayidei koch hamochech usheirasam be'eza pitaron acher mitulot galgaliyut sha'al piatzos hatchunat hayashot. Right? With this new understanding, you can't now answer up a little bit of the old questions and let a little bit of the old understanding of astronomy be intact, right? And, okay, now we understand more, but we still have a lot of questions. No, you can't leave any old thinking, old flat earth thinking around. All of it vanishes, and it's a new paradigm. It's a completely new way of thinking. It's just amazing, right? The new way, it created unity, it harmonized everything, and it also invalidated. So it did two things, right? It invalidated entirely the whole field of astronomy. So much so we're talking about this feels funny, right? But in those days it was very important. What are you going to do when you get to the flat earth? Right? What's going to happen? Right? Kain behofas haruach haisa halalis asavlanit. So the same thing is true with paganism and spirituality. Right? Now he's going to make that jump. Right? Haisa halalis savlanis va'akara shel achdus kinait. Paganism was savlanit, right? Paganism was patient. But its recognition of oneness was kanait, was flexible and tolerant. He's going to use this in a negative way. Mitoch, right? Mitoch shehi klalit velo pratit. Because paganism was very broad, but it wasn't specific. It didn't apply to everything. Vadait, it was vadai velo misupeket, but it wasn't velo misupeket. Harehu miyuchedet velo mishutefet. Right? What he's saying is over here, again, these are hard words, we're just trudging through this today, right? That true unity is fierce but patient, right? So what happened was this, with paganism and with different idolatries, it was very broad, but it was not so specific. It was too flexible, right? We said a light tower is unmoving, it's unwavering, right? So paganism had many, hello, welcome. Shiur Thursday shiur.
Shiur is, I think, after davening.
After davening.
But I can listen to this also.
Please join us, please, right? So a paganism, right? It wasn't unrelenting in the way that it needed to be. It wasn't absolute true. So because of that, it incorporated all different sorts of avodah zarah, all different sorts of paganism, right? And all different sorts of ideas of shittuf and all that stuff. Hakalit eno savlanit, right? But true unity is not patient. True unity is like the light tower. Al pitzura hachisoni shel savlanit. It's not externally patient. Aval betoch kinaut nimsa grini hapnini shel yisod hasavlanit. But, right, when it comes to, again, these are hard words to translate. We're fumbling through this a little bit today, right? But because of its patientness, its savlanut, are found the grains of unrelentingness, right, of true tolerance. Means true tolerance, a universal theory, is able to incorporate everything. And it invalidates other things as well. Something that it's only fake tolerance, it doesn't invalidate and it doesn't incorporate everything. Right? It incorporates some things, like old-fashioned astronomy. It incorporates some ideas, but it doesn't fully invalidate them. Right? But true achdus, true monotheism, true unity is fierce, but also patient. Right? You see how Rav Kook is thinking about this, right? A true universal principle is fierce, but it includes everything, right? When you know the way gravity works, when you know that there's a round Earth, there's no holding on to the old ideas. When you know how germ theory works, right, from Semmelweis, there's no old theories because it's so unrelenting, it's so exacting, it invalidates everything, right? All that flat earth thinking, you don't need to wonder, why are women now dying during childbirth? And come up with all sorts of fantastical theories because the angle of the bed is wrong due to the way the sunlight's coming in. No, there's something called germs. And Semmelweis understood that, right? And he now invalidated all the theory. So it's unrelenting because it's true. Truth, when you hold something up to the truth, it invalidates it. So true monotheism, true spirituality, true Yiddishkeit is unrelenting. But it's also completely unifying, right? Right, to start with, that's the limits of negative Judaism, right? That's the limits of this is bad and that is bad, right? We need to adapt a new universal understanding of Judaism that incorporates everything because it's true. It has true kinaut and has true vadaut, has true klaliut, has true kinut, right? It goes hand in hand. You can't say half. It's true, right? We'll get to the end now. Hasovlanut hachalasha mechaleshes es hachayim, right? Weak tolerance weakens life. Right? There's all different sorts of details and individuation, but there's no unifying principles behind it. But stam kanaut, stam being a kanai, comes from haughtiness. Right? And it makes you to think that you really understand the truth and that things are inter-included with each other when they're really not. Because it's only a giloi of the details, there's not something truly illuminating it from underneath. So a person, right, it doesn't bring true spiritual life. And it doesn't explain things outside itself. Ubitzaros enam, and with narrow mind, beyeser giluyim she'eno yecholim leklolam enam ki'im mimatim es hispashtut hachayim umimatim es dmuz gilei ruach. So what that does is, if you don't have something that's absolutely true and expansive, it makes you feel weak. You get nervous. You start feeling anxious. You fall into self-doubt. Aval hakala el yonah, but true unity, right? True unity. No senes dafka aidei marchavas uvadaut. True unity is broad and certain. Es tchunat hadina b'diyaknut hayichud, in a very gentle way, but that's also very specific in unification. Hamevias akina mishubachat hamolida es gavanut haruach. That brings a praiseworthy jealousy. That brings a praiseworthy relentlessness, like the light tower we're talking about. Hamasira midarka kol rifayon shakatnus apratit. And it removes from it the weakened of all just scattered individual details. Kol safek v'kol shit, of any doubt and any co-joining. Hashem badad yachlichenu ve'eni mo'al nacher. Hashem alone is the comforter, and there is no foreign stranger that joins together with him. Right? That's what we said from Rabbi Nachman, the Pshitas, that it's one and only one. Umitoch shehi klalit, and because it's vast, it's true unity. Because within it inter-includes everything. It doesn't invalidate things. You can't find any exceptions to it, and it creates space to contain everything. It becomes a vessel now for everything. And with this, we increase the appearance of light in all facets of life. We increase the light that happens. And its desire for Patience, it's very fundamental, yisodi, desire for patience. Hu litein makom l'kol netiyah shiur. Its includes and gives space for all human experience, to give space for all light. Shel chayim, of life, v'shel hafat haruchanit, right? For all life and all spiritual growth to take place. Right now, let's just to bring this, I know that was a mouthful, but let's just bring this full circle. Right? What Rav Kook is saying in Milchamas Hadei of Emunah, the worldviews, that having a narrow-minded, constricted view of life is not true Yiddishkeit. True Yiddishkeit is it's kinaut v'vadaut v'kalayut. It's like gravity. It includes everything, no exceptions. So when we come with such a narrow-minded belief system, and what he says is, in the beginning, I'm very skeptical of those Rabbanim who speak bad about other things. And he goes, I doubt that even works. And in fact, it turns people away from Yiddishkeit, right? When we adapt a more broader worldview, Rav Kook is teaching us how to embrace modernity, right? How do we look at, right? And this, he's talking about Zionism in his point, where they completely eradicated any idea of God, right? As we've been discussing at length in different things, right? When we say, no, that's wrong. Why is that wrong? Because of this, and the Torah says that, and the Torah says this, and the Torah says that. He goes, no. That's turning people away from Yiddishkeit. That's turning ourselves away from Yiddishkeit. We feel that our broad understanding is outside the fold of Yiddishkeit, is outside the fold of Or Eloki, is outside the fold of divine light. We need to understand that when we adapt universal God, what could be more broader than E equals MC squared? God and the Torah, which includes everything. It has all the vastness of light, and it includes specific down to the very thing, right? Hashem is Sovev kol almin, Ve'malei kol almin, no exceptions, period. Right? There's no exceptions to the divine law, to the divine rule. And that's something that's freeing. That's something that's liberating. That's something that applies to everything. So everything in our lives happens because everything in the world happens, right? October 7th, Zionism, right? He's talking about Zionists in those days. He's taking a sharp critique of the Rabbanim that were like, the Zionists are no good, and this is no good, and that is no good. No, because you haven't adapted true spiritual Jewish principles that include everything and bring everyone back into the fold, even the Rishayim, right? Because, of course, these were, right, true spiritual principles understand that, of course, this was the Yad Hashem, because there's nothing outside the Yad Hashem, right? So, again, this was more of a technical piece today that we've been going through over here, But you see how broad Rav Kook was, how he's comparing it to Newtonian physics in the pre-paradigmatic stage. So in a certain way, we need to adapt. Again, when you have a true paradigm of something, you have a round earth, all that flat earth thinking goes away, right? When we have this deep Emunah, all the flat earth thinking, right? It's not your experience isn't coming from this person, it's not coming from your finances, it's not coming from the traffic, it's not coming from the bills to pay, it's not coming from the parnas or lack of parnas, it's not coming from your wife, right? It's coming from the inside out, created by God, broadcasted to you. And the more we can understand that our experience is being generated from ourselves, partners within creation, we're partners with Hashem from the inside out, right? And that there's the divine law with no exceptions. So what happens is, at that moment, all the flat earth thinking disappears. And then, of course, it grows again. We're like, oh my God, worrying, right? But the model of subtraction, right? That's true Emunah. True Emunah is living the pshitas of this model of subtraction where you're just quiet and aligned and present. And when you're in that quiet and aligned, divine, present place where it's integrated into you, your mind's not going haywire, right? This person is not riling you up, and that thing is not riling you up. You're in this quiet place of presence that universal laws do, right? I don't need to now be busy with figuring out all sorts of astronomy once I understand that there's a kolach hamoshech, there's gravity. Oh, all that extra, right? I always joke around. When you have more on your mind, you act like a moron. When you have less on your mind, you learn your lesson, right? So we all have that flatter thinking, morons, lesson, less on, right? Where you're able to learn a lesson, you're more in touch with the divine. And you're not frazzled by all different sorts of competing worldviews. You understand the truth, which is inter-inclusive of all. Yeah, amazing. Mazel tov, v'simin tov, yeh lanu v'chol Yisrael, v'simin tov.